Hi everyone, it's Carol here from Owl's Nest Quilters, and we're cutting it up with Carol. So this episode we are going to talk a little bit more about the scanning capabilities of the Scan and Cut. We talked at length the last video on the scan to cut data, and now we're going to talk about the other ways in which your machine can scan. We are going to talk a little bit more about scanning. The last video we did was when we wanted to do the scan to cut data. This time we're going to talk about the direct cut and the scan to the USB and the transfer to the Canvas workspace. So first up is the direct cut. So we have the ability to do things the long way or a short way. So I could, if I wanted to cut this out, I could put this in my scanning mat, scan it, and do all the things that we did in the last video. But I also have the option of doing a direct cut. And the direct cut, we noticed that, for one thing, if you try to do a direct cut with your scanning mat, your machine will revolt. So if I tell it that I want this to scan to a direct cut, you can see that the start button is grayed out. I cannot do that action on the mat, on the scanning mat, because we don't want to cut our scanning mats. So the machine does have that built-in safety guard. So if we accidentally push direct cut when we didn't want to, the machine will alert you to, no, you can't do that. So that's just a little safeguard that they've built in, and something that you have to be aware of. So I'm going to go back home. So when we go to scan, we have the option of doing a direct cut, scan to cut data. The direct cut means that I can directly cut what I have scanned. So I have some cardstock here that I've drawn my little kindergarten pictures of a flower and a pine tree. Yes, that is a pine tree, even though it may not look like one. I'm going to go ahead and load my mat, and this is a standard tack mat that is pretty sticky, so it's sticking my my cardstock. And I'm going to do the direct cut. Now I have a choice between sending my scan to my machine or wirelessly to Canvas workspace. I'm going to do it to my machine, and now we see that the start button is activated, so I can go ahead and start, and it is going to scan my little kindergarten drawings. Release that. Okay, so now I have my little drawings scanned in. I'm going to say OK. And then I have this whole big mishmash. So what your machine does, and that's just how sensitive it is scanning and picking up all of my scoring from various cuts that I've been doing. So all of the things that are around the top, bottom, and sides are all the scoring lines that the machine is picking up. But I can get rid of those. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to ignore the object size because I actually want it to be the size that I've cut. So I'm going to ignore that and go on to processing. And this is where I can edit. So I can edit, and if you don't know this fun little trick about editing things out, you have three little boxes, red boxes here, that if you press those and then you press the far left one that has the arrow, that will give you this cropping window. And you have to think in the opposite way. You're not cropping around what your image is. you're cropping everything that you don't want. So what I want to do is bring this all the way over here because I don't want any of this stuff to be cut. And I'm going to say okay, and okay. And now I see that all that's in the red, I'm going to trash and say okay, and all of that's gone. I'm going to leave that one there for now. I'm going to press on this one. So I'm going to go back to my 3 red boxes. I'm going to pick up that cropping window. I'm going to pull this arrow over to the right and try to get as much of that in there. I'm going to say okay, and trash, and okay, and that got rid of all that. I'm going to do it one last time and do what's up here, this one, and I'm going to pull my cropping window up to the very top. So anything that is inside this window is what your machine is going to recognize as something that you do not want in this case. I'm going to hit okay, and trash, and okay, and all of that's gone. So when you hit your arrows, you're going to hit one, either the left or the right arrow consistently. Otherwise, you're going to keep going back and forth. So I'm going to hit the right arrow once, and it's going to jump to my tree. I'm going to hit the right arrow again, and it does jump to this little mark here. I want to get rid of that. In this case, I'm just going to hit my trash, and it says okay to delete selected data, and I say okay. Now when I do the right arrow, all I should be toggling is my flower and my tree. So there are no other extraneous cuts that the machine is going to recognize and do. So that's what I want. So now I'm going to hit OK, and please select. So I am going to cut, and I need to put this back in. So in theory, you shouldn't take your mat out because it's already positioned exactly the way it was scanned, but because I'm in such tight quarters, I took it out. Okay, this is an important screen to pay attention to. It's going to tell you what it is you're doing, if you're cutting, if you're drawing, if you're embossing, the approximate time that it's going to take, what pressure your machine is on, what speed it's on. But this is the most important one, whether you're a half cut or a full cut. And I do have my half cut on, which means that if I was doing vinyl before, and with vinyl you do want to do a half cut, and we'll explain that later with a vinyl class. But I want a full cut, so I'm going to go into my wrench, and I'm going to find my half cut, and it is on. I want to take that off and say okay. Now on this one, my half cut is off, and I'm ready to cut. So I'm going to hit start, and it is going to directly cut what I have scanned. Those of you who have some of the older models who don't have the automatic pressure, it's a nice feature. In the past, we would have to go in and do, adjustments and test cuts and all that. These auto blades are really, really nice. And if I have a good blade, which I don't know if I do or not, it should have cut. And indeed it did. So you can see how it perfectly cut out my drawings and my little tree. So that's the direct cut. And that is a nifty little feature if you have something that's on cardstock already, if you've photocopied something onto cardstock, if you have like old cards that you want to use, repurpose, you can cut your cards out with the direct cut. So this is kind of a nice little feature that these machines have. But that is that. on, if I'm going to go home and scan. Okay, the next one is scan to your USB. And so instead of scanning to your machine or wirelessly, which was the only option we were given with the direct cut, you also have the option of scanning it to a USB, which is great. Especially if you want to take it for doing class and you want to take it to class with you and share it with other people, you can do it on a USB. And then this is the transfer to Canvas Workspace. So I can scan this directly to my Canvas Workspace and make some adjustments and then come back and do my cuts. So Brother gives you a lot of different options in terms of your scanning capabilities. It's not something that you just solely have to do with the scanning mat, although this is probably the most well-used tool that you'll use is the scanning mat. That's the easiest way to scan things. And if you want more information, I highly recommend, if you haven't already gotten the playbook for the scan and cut, this is actually an exceptional playbook. It really walks you through different parts of your machine, different processes, and so on. So the chapter 11 goes through all of the scanning and the direct cuts, the scans to the data, all kinds of things, and then they have you do little exercises and so on to get used to them. So this is a good investment to make, especially if it's something that you are going to use a lot of. And so I do highly recommend it. I know I've seen some questions on Facebook as to whether or not this is worth it, and I do highly recommend this. So I think that takes you through all of the different ways of doing a scan, and we'll see you next time.
Owl's Nest Quilters, because you love to create.